What's interesting about French Maoism, as I mentioned its democratic turn, its turn towards social movements, is that intellectuals in France became more humble because they realized that Leninism or intellectual elitism, like Sartre, was no longer the way forward. Because in May '68, in the student revolt, there were no intellectuals who were leaders. There was no party that was leading. The Communist Party was not the avant-garde. It was the derrière-garde. It was behind. The students led the way. And this gave intellectuals a new sense of humility, a new sense of the importance of listening. And this was also a grafting or transposition of some of Mao's notions of the investigation and listening to the people, and all these slogans about the primacy of the people and populism. There was a perception of the importance of Chinese populism that was very influential in the French context, and it helped change the notion of the intellectual to make it less elitist and more democratic.
好，他说到这些刚刚所说的60年代68年以后的社会运动啊，使得对知识分子使得本身他们更加谦卑。就是说他们都知道就是特别是当时的学生都知道就是原先的列宁主义啊，包括当时的知识分子里面的萨特的这种式的那种介入啊，已经不再是起到那个领先作用，因为在68年的5月革命里面，没有任何主要知识分子是当时的领袖，是这个运动的领袖。所以说，这个整个这个之后68年之后的社会运动，使得当时这些大牌知识分子啊，他们重新改变态度，他们学会去卑谦，学会去倾听。然后呢，从就是他们就是从毛泽东的一个调查的理念，从毛的听群众意见、人民的重要性，甚至毛主义的那种民粹主义的这个理念，他们学到是什么呢？他们学到的是更少的那种就是这种傲慢，而更多的这个整个思想氛围更多的民主化。
I talked for a minute about Sartre's role in all this. In 1970, the French Minister of Justice banned the two Maoist newspapers. It was called, it's a Maoist phrase, La cause du peuple, the people's cause, and arrested two of the editors. I mean, which is very ironic since the newspaper was probably read by 200 or 300 people at most. It was a French daily. And all of a sudden, although Maoism had been, this is 1970, had been very small, all of a sudden it became, the French would say, a cause célèbre. It became headlines, the arrest of the student leaders. And Sartre comes in to serve as the editor of the banned newspapers, daring Pompidou, who's now the president, to arrest him.
他先说一下萨特的在这里面的角色，就是当时在1970年代的时候，就是2份主要的一个毛主义的一个报纸被当时政府，就是庞皮杜的政府所禁止掉了，就是说当时其实最有而且还抓了2个主编。其实当时最有意思的是，当时这个整个毛主义的报纸影响力只有200-300个人，很小一个群体。但是随着这次捕抓以后，这个政治行动以后呢，它一下子变成了当时社会的一个标题性的一个新闻。而这个时候，萨特就进来，他说他就是担任报纸的名义上的一个主编，然后呢，就是他其实是希望庞皮杜来抓他。
And this was very important for Sartre. You know, in 1970, he was 65 years old. He was no longer so fashionable. You know, he had been surpassed during the 60s by the structuralists who you saw on the screen there. I don't know if you caught the names. Lévi-Strauss, Foucault, Althusser, Lacan, etc., who weren't interested in Sartre's philosophy. This was a way for Sartre, this fusion with the Maoists, to relive all of his frustrated revolutionary hopes and fantasies. Sartre had been rediscovered by French youth, and this was the era of youth. So this was very important for Sartre.
所以说，他说当时那个对萨特其个人其实蛮重要的一件事，就是说，因为当时70年的时候，他是05年生的嘛，他当时已经65岁了。他刚刚说他已经不再是时尚代表了，因为当时60年代的时候，就是结构主义运动啊，对萨特的哲学，包括那个列维斯特劳斯啊、那个阿尔都塞啊、拉康啊、那个福柯啊，对这个基本上把那个萨特的哲学已经进入一个很大的挑战。然后在这个时候呢，就是说萨特走出来，跟毛主义者联合在一起，然后重新革命，然后一下子就是说，当时法国的青年又重新发现了，哦，原来萨特还是这样一个就是非常领先的一个人物。
Yeah. And now let me conclude by telling you Foucault's role in all this. Ironically, in 1968, Foucault was in Tunisia, where he was teaching in Tunis. So he never experienced 1968 firsthand. He would get telephone reports from his partner, who was a Maoist. This is important. Daniel Defer is his name.
他说那个，其实接下来就说福柯了。福柯就是说，当时他在68年的时候，我们都知道他不在法国巴黎，他在那个突尼斯教学嘛。他是通过他的那个同性恋伴侣那个丹尼尔的那个每天的电话来告诉他发生了什么事。
Yeah. Now, it's very important to understand that during the 60s, Foucault was a structuralist. Structuralism suggests that events don't happen. Okay, events are passé. That all you need to know to understand history or politics or culture is the deep underlying structures that determine everything in the superstructure. And you can see how this would be compatible with Marxism and how you would get a structural Marxism with Althusser.
他说，60年代的时候，就是说是福柯在60年的时候是一个结构主义者。那么我就解释一下什么是结构主义的这个哲学，就是说结构主义就是说是就是他一个信条，就是说事件不会发生。就是说，我们怎么去理解历史呢？怎么去理解那个变化呢？就是说是主要是有一个深层结构，然后再影响到表层的结构。所以这样你就能看到，就是说，其实结构主义跟马克思主义它是可以结合的，结合的就是阿尔都塞就是一个马克思主义跟结构主义结合的一个产物。
In 1971, Foucault, with a couple of other French intellectuals, February 1971, founded the Prison Informations Group as a support network for, I mentioned that the Maoist leaders in France, the newspaper editors were arrested, as a support group for the imprisoned Maoists as political prisoners.
他说那个71年的2月份啊，这个福柯和其他的一些法国知识分子，然后创立了一个很有名气的一个监狱信息群体。这个群体就当时不是说了嘛，有几个毛主义的那个编辑被抓起来，而这个监狱信息群体一开始目的就是能够更大的去帮助他们这些在监狱里的人。
Yeah. So, I conclude with this, but the important thing to understand is that, I know Foucault is read and discussed in China and is important, but what's my addition to this, there's a big literature on Foucault, many debates, he's very, au courant and popular all over the world. My contribution to understanding Foucault, which I talk about at Fudan tomorrow, is that to really understand Foucault's transition from a structuralist to, you say, a genealogist, or someone who's interested in power and microphysics of power and biopolitics. Okay, we in the United States, for example, we just start reading his key book from the 1970s, Discipline and Punish, in French, Surveiller et Punir. It comes out in 1975, and it's had a big impact. But my claim, or my thesis, is if you really want to understand Foucault's theory of power and discipline and punish, you have to, and think of the title, discipline, yeah? You have to go back to his experiences with this prison informations group, which was run by Maoists, and his partner, Daniel Defer, as well, because the prison informations group was all about the Maoist concept of enquête, or investigations in the prisons. And this was a very influential group that captured the attention in the aftermath of May 68 of French intellectuals and French society to focus on problems of punishment or penality or prison life. This is the microphysics of power that's so important for Foucault.
好，他知道福柯在中国非常也已经很受欢迎了，其实他在世界各地也很受欢迎了，就在很多论证啊，很多关于福柯的讨论集都在出版。然后沃林教授认为他的贡献在于理解福柯上面，就是说是福柯怎么从60年代这样一个结构主义者变到就是说70年代后期的一个福柯，就是关注谱系学，就谱系学是从尼采来的，关注谱系学，关注权力，关注就是权力的微观物理学，包括也关注权力的生命权利，这是福柯一个自己词，生命权利的概念。然后呢，其实他是现在美国就是重新在关注福柯75年发表的重要著作，就是《规训与惩罚》。而这本书其实跟当时的福柯创立的监狱信息群体是很相关，这个群体由他领导，还有他的 partner， 就是说Daniel DeFeo， 这些人在领导的这样一个毛主义式的一个群体很有关系，因为当时这个群体的主要就是用毛的一个调查的一个作为一个主要的一个方式来看监狱生活，所以说当时在6月就是68年的5月革命以后，正是这个监狱信息群体受到了社会跟媒介的关注，使得他们去关注惩罚的问题，去关注监狱的条件问题。
Yeah, and this will be my last remark, and then we can go to questions or have a discussion. What's important to understand here, Foucault is really the heir to Sartre among French intellectuals. He is Sartre's successor, and what's important to understand is that the change in the concept of power or domination. Now, we talked about Marxism before, and how for Marxism, power or domination is located primarily in the factory, and it primarily has to do with the relationship between wage labor and capital. What Foucault realized, and this is why Foucault is really the heir of May 68, is that power isn't just contained in the factory or at the workplace. The manifestations of discipline and domination suffuse society as a whole. And Foucault learned this lesson by combining the critique of everyday life in May 68 and these enquêtes, or investigations, in the prison that he and the Prison Informations Group undertook during the year 1971 to understand a new conception of the way that power functions or works. And this is how he gets his notion, the famous Foucauldian term or dyad of power knowledge, the way that techniques of knowledge and information and examinations, etc., and expertise structures power relations. So this is the paradox or the irony of my own enquête or my own investigation, is that these people who start out as Marxists, as Leninists, and as Maoists undergo this, what I call a learning process or transformation, whereby they're still political, they're still engaged, but in a much wider sense, in a much broader sense. And they now work on power in everyday life, and this has to do with the outcome, or the dénouement of the French Maoist experience.
好，他说他最后一个谈一个观点，就是说福柯都知道是萨特的继承人，就是说他是在他的贡献就在于他把原先的一个权利和支配的概念彻底的改变了。就是说以前马克思主义者的对这个权利和支配的理解，就主要在工厂里面，主要就是工资跟资本的对抗。而福柯为什么能够称为68年5月的一个真正继承人？就是说他发现了，就是说这个权利不只是在工厂里面，而是在这个规训啊，权利的规训啊，在社会的整个范畴里面。所以说，福柯从68年的他们当时的日常生活批判走出来，再加入他后面的71年的对监狱的调查，然后整个发展出了一个新的权利的概念，就是说他最著名的福柯主义的一个概念，就是权利知识、知识权利或权利知识。就是说这个知识，就是信息也好、审查也好、专业知识也好，都跟权利有关。 所以说，就是那个沃林教授就说，他的一个最后的一个论点就是说，当时最初是马克思主义者也好，列宁主义者也好，毛主义者也好，通过在68年以后啊，他称之为一个学习的过程。这个学习过程之后，他们懂得了，就是说把一个批判进入一个更宽广，推到一个更宽广的层面上，推到一个日常生活的一个方方面面的一个层面上。
我想问一下，就是关于那个戈达尔的问题，因为就是戈达尔可以说是那个文艺风暴过来就直到现在都走得最远的一个人，而且他的那个激进思想，直到90年代他还在拍非常激进的那些电影。就戈达尔他自己说过一句话，他说我不是在拍政治电影，但是我是在政治化的拍电影。我觉得就是说，他可以说是在实践一种就是无产阶级的电影的这样的一个方式，包括就除了在那个电影语言上面，他有很多的很突出的一些设想以外，就是他自己，比如说在一些非常实践方面，比如说那个电影的发行或者观影的体制，包括他们自己搞的一个电影小组。
而且请抓紧问题是什么？
对，然后我想意思就是说，就他这样的方式，他这样拍电影的方式，但自己他反而消减了他这个电影，因为他的电影到后来就几乎没就大量的那些拼贴的内容，反而把电影的那个故事性。然后包括一个完整的一个内核的一个东西，慢慢的消解掉了。就是说，他这样的拍电影的方式，就是说，其实是最接近无产阶级电影的一种可能性。但是，我就想问林教授，就是说，你怎么看待他这种电影实验室成功了，或者说就是在哪种意义上成功了？但是如果没有观众的话，或者说没有观众可以理解他的话。就是这个意义何在？然后包括我还想问的问题就是说，我似乎觉得就是电影在原初的，就是说天然的意义上，它可能就是资产阶级化的，比如说或者说它需要一个故事性的一个东西，它需要漂亮的那个东西，漂亮的外表，但是实际上就是那个戈达做的事情是破坏这一切，那他这样的实验有没有可能成功
？Yeah. It's a very good question, and I think you've answered your own question. I mean, you obviously know Godard's films very well. For those of you who don't, I mean, you gave the correct information. With La Chinoise in 1967, Godard bid adieu, goodbye, to what he called bourgeois cinema. You know, in '67 he had this banner year, this very successful year. In June he came out with Weekend, which was very successful. I can't describe it. I mean, but I tell you, the end of Weekend, the last shot or clip says. Fin du cinéma, okay? Fin du film, fin du cinéma. Very significant. End of the film, end of cinema. Yeah? His next film is La Chinoise. And the next year, actually in 1969, he founds a radical film group with a comrade, Jean-Pierre Gorin, Gorin, called the Dziga Vertov Group, which is named after the great Russian film director of the 1920s, man with a movie camera, yeah, Dziga Vertov. Remember, I told you about the importance of bourgeois self-hatred in French culture before? Godard made all these brilliant films. It's just the 50th anniversary this year of Weekend, Breathless. But Godard was persuaded by the spirit of the times, the zeitgeist, and firmly believed, he's very influenced by Bertolt Brecht, and Brecht's notion of that cinema has to have this alienation effect. You can't comfort the viewer or soothe the viewer. You have to alienate the viewer and cause the viewer to reflect intellectually. Okay, he wanted to end naturalistic cinema. So the films are very difficult to watch, and certainly one can't judge their success in terms of the conventional criteria of cinema because Godard had abandoned those criteria. And I think basically I agree with your point.
他就是说，他其实是你已经回答了自己已经回答了这个你的问题，就是说他，因为我对那个导演不是很熟悉嘛，他说67年的时候他拍了一部，就是说他已经跟自己就是说，他说他有个标语，就是说我跟资产阶级的电影说拜拜。然后呢，就是说在69年的时候，他成立了一个激进的一个电影组织啊，就是说他当时就是说这跟那个当时资产阶级的一个自我痛恨本身一个文化背景是很相关的。所以说戈达尔的他的一个电影本身，他就关注的是一个就是一个时间的一个精神。就是说，电影本身啊是一个，它本身就是一个异化的形式，它本身不是去为了去那个对那个观众去起一个那个 comfort 去起一个安慰的作用，它是去促使他们去反思，逼迫他们去反思。所以他承认你是对的，就是说那个戈达尔电影是非常难看，就是但是呢，他的成功不是评价他成功与否，不能用以前的评价那个电影的标准来衡量。
My first question is, do you feel fascinated by the 68? And my second question is, the president of French, Sarkozy, said we have to re-evaluate these 78 events. And how do you evaluate these events now? My third question is, how do you evaluate the Maoism philosophy, who is very popular in America now? His name is Al-Badi. And my fourth question is, why is America is so fascinated by the post deconstruction?
Deconstruction.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.